it's a form of massive ethnic cleansing.
Many Pashtuns feel like that. These were the majority. They were the majority of the population numerically, and in the past, they were, the power structure, essentially power, whether they were ethnic or linguistic Pashtuns, but they controlled and managed the country, has done so for 200 years. But now they have been made into a second class. And the Pashtuns don't like that, because although Hamid Karzai, the president who was installed by the United States, he is Pashtun, but he will have nothing to do with the Pashtuns and vice versa, because in a way he really has betrayed the Pashtuns. So the Pashtuns now feel very much second class and marginalized. If you go into Afghanistan, most of the important positions in the civil service, in the military, the contracting, where the money is to be made, embassies, etc., most of these are non-Pashtuns. And the Pashtuns can see this, even in universities, for example. And they don't like that. And I can tell you this, unless and until there's some kind of equilibrium, ethnic equilibrium restored into society, I don't think there will be peace and harmony amongst the different groups in Afghanistan.
And the second group after the Pashtun is what?
Tajiks.
The Tajiks from
are
Tajikistan. So they're all this.
They speak Tajiki. They're, they look a certain way. Although in appearance, the Pashtuns and Tajiks they can be quite similar, but it's a question of ethnicity and the language Farsi. And then the next group will be the Hazaras, about 10%, the Uzbeks about 10%, and the Turkmens maybe 6 or 7%, and then many, many other groups. And I think the important thing to resolve the conflict in Afghanistan would be, one, again, to have proportional representation of the different ethnic groups throughout the power structure in the system. But also, if you go to a place like Bagram right now, in Bagram, where many of the techniques used in Guantanamo and Abu Ghraib were perfected in Bagram first, almost all of the prisoners, the 700 prisoners in Bagram, are Pashtuns. And most of the people who were brought to Guantanamo from Afghanistan also happen to be Pashtuns. Because you know what was happening? When the United States attacked and invaded in October 2001, if you turned anybody over to the United States force and say, here is a Talib or Al-Qaeda, you were paid anywhere. People, so a lot of innocent people, young people, old people, innocent people who had nothing to do with any of these conflicts, ended up in Guantanamo because someone got paid for turning somebody over.
For turning somebody in.
And they're mostly Pashtuns.
Another question I had, you mentioned that Pashtun and Tajik are similar. So, but in a country like this, I would imagine that the average European soldier or whatever, NGOs, is not overly familiar with the ethnic composition or physiognomic composition.
Or its significance, yes, where ethnic identity and ethnic politics.
It would seem to me that it's almost impossible to have, even apart from the fact, even without making any comment on the advisability, on the horribleness of the war.
Yeah.
What rationale there is to kill somebody instead of someone else? Because they send these drones.
Yes.
On what rationale? Who decides?
Well,
there's a whim at the moment. Let's bomb the village because somebody told us that there is someone.
Well,
is it known? Because we don't hear about it. We only know about a drone killed 50 people, but.
Bomb the wedding or
yes.
Or just a family get together or school or this happens every week, Jimmie. Even though General McChrystal said when he was first appointed, a couple of months ago, said he would like to minimize civilian casualties, but last year, for example, at least 2,400 civilians were killed, and more than half of them were under 18. Which is to say more than half of them were children. These are UN figures, So, yes, I mean, in the middle of the night or in daytime, these drones or the bombings, like just 2 days ago, the Americans killed 4 Afghan soldiers because they thought they were opposition people. This is right near Kabul, in Wardak. So mistakes are made, but some people would say that these are not really mistakes all the time, but it's a way to terrorize the population.
No, we should think so.
You know, it's not all that coincidental, but also that, you know, these mass murders, you know, or bombings, etc., are a way to sort of terrorize a whole state population to capitulate, you know, to give in. The decision, of course, is a military decision with strategic and political significance. But the important thing is that right now, last week's conference, you know, we should talk a little about that. Last Thursday, there was a major conference in London where 60 foreign ministers, including Hillary Clinton, and the World Bank, IMF, and people like that, the UN representatives attended, because now everyone, including General McChrystal, Robert Gates, you know, President Obama, Petraeus, Holbrooke, you know, Hillary Clinton, the UN, and everybody has reached the conclusion that there's no military solution to this conflict. But also, it's very, very clear that the war is a stalemate, which is to say the opposition is winning and NATO and the Americans are losing, because if it's a superpower power and NATO, if you're not winning, it means you're really losing. And so there seems to be a sort of a frantic attempt to find some kind of a non-military solution to this problem, hence the conference and the resolution.
It's interesting. To me, it's astounding, probably to also to many people, how the, go ahead, how many people, how the opposition is fighting the West of NATO, including the soldiers from Lithuania who have an axe to grind with the Afghans. It's crazy.
Yes, yes.
Given this overwhelming disparity of forces, how can the opposition even attempt to fight back? Apparently, they're fighting back with some success. Who is it possible to get, even to organize arms? Do you have to buy arms? Yes. Who is helping the opposition? Or are the individual groups like we volunteers? Or are they? Is there a concerted effort by some groups? Is there a hierarchy that says, okay, we will defend Afghanistan against foreign forces?
Yes.
In your opinion?
Well, it's interesting. I like Andrew Bacevich. He's a former military man, now teaching at Boston University, a military historian. But, you know, his famous book is The Limits to Power, you know, Limits of Power. And his analysis is that even that there are structural impediments to even a superpower's military might, and that there's so much, for example, U.S. military can do and will do, and no more. But the other point also is that many people have observed that in some ways the opposition, which in the American press are called Taliban because it's very simple, and it's not that simple because the resistance to occupation is multifaceted. The Taliban are one group, there's the Haqqani group, there's the Hikmatyaz Hizb Islami group, there's the drug mafia, for example, there are the smugglers, there are independent warlords. There are all kinds of different groups fighting the resistance in the central government in Afghanistan for their own particular reasons, but they have one thing in common. None of them like the Afghan government because they see it as illegitimate and a puppet regime. And the other thing they have in common is they don't like being occupied. And anyway, the point is that it has been said that the Pakistani ISI, Inter-Services Intelligence, perhaps provides some training, guidance, and maybe earlier weapons. But now, what people have said is the Taliban insurgency, which is, say, the Pashtun insurgency, can go on indefinitely because they don't depend on anybody. Because they're self-sufficient, they have enough money.
Oh, I see.
They make enough money. They have enough money. Because for one thing, Jimmie, the U.S. intelligence says that the Taliban have shadow government in place in all of the 33